Well, hello there, humans, hippies, earthlings, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and whoever you are lucky enough to be doing it too. I'm Bushka on Blitz, and I'm back today with, well, it's not long overdue. It's not one that's been asked for a lot on the YouTube channel, on the forums and Facebook and everything else, but it is one that I think isn't featured enough in game and is well worth a look. This is the AT2, the Tier 5 British tank destroyer, and it's almost like the plug and play version of a tank. There is not much you really need to know about the game to play this thing. In fact, the ease of use is phenomenal. You don't have to worry about your camo and all that kind of thing. You don't have to worry about turning your turret because your turret doesn't turn. You don't have to worry about angling your armor because you just got a whole bucket load of armor, and you don't have to worry about aiming the gun because the gun is pretty bloody accurate and it really does the business. It is just the most stereotypical big armor, nothing else tank that you're going to find in its tier. And that's grand because if you are a newer player and you're looking for a tank to just get to grips with the game, this is not a bad option at all. The AT2 is very, very simple. It's interesting because most of the British TDs top out their tier for DPM or go damn close. And that's damage per minute. The damage per minute stats are pretty much straightforward ways of indicating high numbers of hit points that you can take off the enemy. And that's all well and good. The higher that number, the better. The AT2 though is actually at the bottom of the DPM stats for standard tech tree TDs at its tier, and that's very unlike the rest of the British tree. I just did the AT15, you might remember that. That was absolutely just a DPM monster. The Tortoise, that's another one. I mean, these tanks tend to be right up there. And it does have a couple of particularly British traits though. It has huge rate of fire, 20.51 rounds per minute, which is going to enable you to perma-track absolutely anything in the game without dropping your adrenaline. So that's great, and that's a really good skill. But let's break it down against, say, the other tech tree TDs at Tier 5, like the Stug, the M10, the T49, the SU85, the Toaster. What's it got going for it? Well, it doesn't have the best DPM. In fact, it's got the worst damage per minute numbers at the tier, which is surprising because Brit tanks tend to have the highest. It's got the worst penetration numbers at its tier, which again is surprising because, I mean, you'd think if you don't have great DPM, you'd probably have better penetration, and all these kind of things come into it. No. The rate of fire is amazing. Now, don't get me wrong, that is a very, very handy asset, but that also means you have to expose yourself for a long time, which is a really bad thing generally in the game. But that's not such a problem for the AT2, because the AT2 has easily the best armor profile in its tier. It's not even close. It is a tremendously strong tank in terms of armor, and that makes up for all the other sins. Despite the fact it only goes 20 kilometers an hour, despite the fact it only does 20 degrees of traverse, despite the fact that its gun is probably one of the least accurate in its tier, well, it's middle of the road. It's 0.328 dispersion, running rammer, vents, double rations. What it really, really, really has going for it is big, big chunks of armor. It's got 200 millimeters of hull armor that's sloped in places, and it's nigh on impenetrable from the front for most tanks. You can see here, even when they've all run me down at the end of the day, all these loads here, lights and auto loaders, just how tough a nugget the AT2 can be. Now the front of it's 200 millimeters all over the place, and lots of slope and lots of tough armor. And even with the 150 odd millimeters of the Uncos APCR, you're not gonna penetrate the front. The lower glacis is not weak. All that. The side skirts are ridiculous. People try and shoot you in the sides all the time with 100 millimeters of pen, like I am here, and you don't go through because those skirts are 76 millimeters, and then the actual plate behind it is 25 millimeters, and you got like another 25 millimeters or so of track in there, and it'll stop heat and all those kind of things. The best place to shoot this thing is obviously in the bum, or if you can't get that, the hatch at the top of it. But all the while you're there at some kind of range, trying to hit the hatch and trying to stop long enough so that your very poor accuracy tier 5 gun will do what you tell it to, the AT2 is pumping you full of hot love. And that is not a fun thing to have happen to you. Because the AT2, while it may not have the best DPM for a tier 5 TD in its tier, still does nearly 2,000 damage per minute before an adrenaline run. And that means that you are going to go down awfully quick. Because while I did have a bit of a whinge about it being the worst DPM really for its tier in a TD, that's still good DPM. Because you forget, DPM at this tier is all well and good, but that's TDs. Heavies and lights and mediums, they don't tend to have anywhere near that. So you have plenty of punching power. You're going to need to use APCR occasionally for your tier 5 and tier 6 heavies. There's just no way around it. Some of them are quite tough to pen, and you do not have the best penetration numbers. Just over 110 mils of pen on your AP rounds and your 6-pounder. But you're plenty accurate, you can get the job done, and you can pump DPM. So what's the drawback then? If your armor is so strong, what's the drawback? Well, obviously your turret doesn't rotate, and that's where you struggle. But you're such a nugget. You can punch and bounce shots. You've got absolutely no right bouncing. And what that lets you do is just keep on punching and keep on punching and keep on punching, even when there's tanks all around you and everyone thinks that you're about to die. You just keep getting these little bounces and keep moving on, and you can see here they've moved on. They think I'm done and dusted, and I'm just not. The tank just won't give up. It doesn't know how to give up. Your big weakness is obviously going to be experienced players who will drive past a tank like this and put damage into the sides of the tank. And that's fine. There's nothing you can do about that. But if you're a newer player and you're looking for a tank that you just drive forward and press the button on, this is the AT2. I'm going to show you a couple of examples here of just how quick that TD DPM and that rate of fire can burn things down. Now, the KV-1S there has the derp gun. You'll see there he's tried to fire a little bit of derp, just taken out a track, and I've managed to jiggle at the right time. I kind of anticipated his reload. And look at him, he's stuck. 20 rounds a minute will do an awful lot of perma-tracking. All I'm doing is pressing the button. And HE, this is the best tank in the tier to be dealing with HE in. Honest to God, you have side skirts that are 76 millimeters. So there's no one who's going to pen your side skirts. And if they want to use heat to get through them, well, guess what? There's a huge big chunk of spaced armor. That side skirt, track, plate, there's no worries whatsoever with heat and HE from the side of this tank. And because you've got such strong armor at the front, there's just nowhere for HE really to get a toe hold. They might occasionally duck in the very top of your hatch, but that's about it. I mean, it's tough as nails. Where you're going to struggle is when you push up, run out of teammates, and get isolated. Because as you can see here, without a turret, you simply cannot keep track of all the incoming fire. And this becomes very problematic when you're facing tier 6 tanks, because their penetration numbers are better, their damage numbers are better, they're more capable of nullifying what is your biggest strength, which is this ridiculous armor profile. But even then, you look, I've got all these tanks around me trying to blow me up, and they get me. But there's all these tier 6 tanks there, and we're still kicking and punching and gouging, and it's just this tremendously tough customer. If you have not driven tanks in this game before, it's like the T110E3 of tier 5. You drive in that direction, and when something red comes across the button, you press it. I mean, bang, move on, bang, move on. And you don't really have to angle your armor. It helps at times. You don't really have to do anything special. It helps at times. You can do your side scraping and all that kind of thing if you want, on keeping the left-hand side hidden if you really want to hide that hatch, and that's all well and good. But it's tier 5. Half the people you're going to fight against don't have the experience to understand that. You can just drive forward and do your best. And although you're only going to do it at 20 kilometers an hour, well, big deal. There's also going to be all these tanks, these auto loaders and lower tier seal clubbing tanks that just can't pen you. they really cannot pen you. You've got such a massive armor profile at the front. It's bloody hilarious. Now this is a tier 5 game, and you're going to see, I mean, this is the quintessential AT2 game. I'm just going to be really aggressive, and I'm going to keep driving around and around and try to find a way to put myself in front of lots of red tanks so that when the time comes, I am perfectly capable of finishing them off. And the only way to do that is to drive at them. You don't really have a gun that's built for sniping, guys. At 20 rounds a minute, I mean, a sniping weapon is great and being accurate is great, but at 20 rounds a minute, you got to have time on target. If you don't have time on target, you are going to be pointless to your team. And the only way you're going to get time on target is to drive at the enemy. So don't get in the AT2 and crawl up the back mountain of dead rail. You're wasting everyone's time. Absolutely everyone's. Yeah, you might have a good game every once in a while. The sun's going to shine on a dog's bum at least once, but that doesn't mean it's a good idea. You really have to just keep being aggressive and try and punch above your weight, because look, I know it's terrible. The biggest weakness of this tank is that if you get behind it, you can't shoot backwards, and that's all there is to it. You're going to be dead. But so what? Use the AT2 in a fun and fantastic way. And that means getting out there and just smashing stuff. This KV-1, I mean, you can see how much red there is there. I'm trying to just pen all the time with AP. And it's pretty crucial that we get the shots. You can see there's plenty of space there. And your gun platform is so slow and steady that it's not really going to make much of a difference. And we only go to APCR when he's hull down, and we really can't do much else. And we absolutely got to get the kill. All I've done this game is drive forward, and in the AT2, that's all you have to do. Knowing your game mechanics and everything is great. Having the ability to do all that other fancy stuff, that's all well and good. But in the AT2, you don't have a turret, you're not fast, you don't have anything else going for you. You are quite literally just a very slow 1,000-cut death. And that's all you want to do. You just want to pick a target, spend time on target, keep pressing the button until they explode. That's it, boys and girls. Heaps and heaps of stuff coming up. I just did a podcast yesterday with Ezekimo and JC Ware, which will be out in the next couple of days. Two real-life tankers. Ezki drove... Eskimo, sorry, drove Leopards. JC Ware drove bloody everything, all the American tanks. And I want to thank them very much for that. That was a wonderful insight, and I'd like to get them back on to do a little bit more as well, actually. There's lots and lots of stuff coming up. The TOG2 review is coming up. We've got, always, at Bushka on Blitz is my Twitter handle. Send me any questions, any queries in that. Hashtag Bushka, and I'll get them up in the next podcast, and we'll see what we can do. Until next time, boys and girls, stay safe on the battlefield.